Resident Evil? No thanks. I prefer President Evil.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
But if you let her see that man say, look, sure that you're not that shy. Let her see that man say, look, sure you're that type of guy.
Now if you know me, you know I'm a pretty big Resident Evil fan. And while I've only been a fan for like 3 years, I've played the remake of the first game, the remake of the second game, the fourth game, the fifth game, and the 7th one. I'm a big fan of the way these games go about movement in a horror setting. And I know there's a lot of fake gamers out there that would have you believe that these controls suck dick or are clunky shitty doo-doo. And yeah, that's kind of the point. In the same way the old Castlevania games circumvented their genre by making platforming something to think about and focus on, the old Resident Evil games throw everything you would expect about a shooter out the window. And what setting could this be more effective in than a horror game? None. If you ask me, this sudden juxtaposition only improves with time. The more accustomed we get to games handing us the same general control scheme, the more games that challenge us with their control schemes prove their point. I think games with weird control schemes age way better than those without because they're memorable. And depending on how they're applied, they can be way more effective than the average control scheme. These controls are meant to be an obstacle for you to overcome. To me, it perfectly exemplifies the hopeless, adversity-filled environment that these games take place in, and it fucking slaps to the moon. She's going, she's gone, home run, the fucking Chicago Sharks take it for the win. I'm sure by now you're able to kind of piece together some of the problems I have with the new Resident Evil remakes. As much as I like a lot about them, the controls are a little too simple for me as a Resident Evil fan. I fucking played 100 games with this control scheme, give me something cool! At the end of the day, I don't really hold anything against Resident Evil for modernizing. It helps more people experience Resident Evil, and who can be mad at that? As a general rule, I'm totally fine with remakes of games changing things to the source material as long as it serves a purpose and provides a fulfilling experience. That being said, Resident Evil 3 sucks fucking dick. The more I think about the Resident Evil 3 remake, the more disappointed I am. Especially since I decided to go back and play the original Resident Evil 3 to see what was changed. Mostly because I didn't want any goddamn goblins in my comment section saying, well, the original game was short too, and the remake is also short. So right off the bat, it's obvious that it's the same controls and same camera perspective in both remakes. But what they did keep from Resident Evil 3 were the mechanics of dodging and being able to throw enemies off of you. And as much as I like these mechanics in the original game, these don't work here. The tap X to not die as fast mechanic doesn't really work that well. I think the presentation is kind of lame because it's telling you, like in the middle of the screen, really obnoxiously to mash X. And not only that, but when you mash X, you're not actually escaping, you're just making the animation go fast. In the original, not only was I mashing every button on my controller because it didn't tell me what to press, which actually made it kind of scary. Shaking enemies off in the original game was dramatic and scary, and you didn't know how long it was gonna be before they got off of you. This shit deflates tension. Plus, in a more streamlined gameplay style, I'm surprised that they even kept this in at all. Resident Evil 2 didn't have it. As for the dodge mechanic, I'll come back to that a little later. But what I'm surprised they didn't keep in was the live selection mechanic. It was almost like a choose your own adventure mechanic, and it wasn't that big of a deal in the original game, but it seems like something that they should expand upon in a remake. Most of what everybody's talking about this game is how short it is. I'm really bad at these games, and it took me 5.5 hours. My first Resident Evil 2 playthrough of Leon and Claire took me a total of like 13 to 14 hours. And after playing the original, where is everything, man? Where's the game? There's so little of what made Resident Evil 3 fun that it's a completely different experience. The demo for Resident Evil 3 I beat in 15 minutes, and I thought it was because they didn't want to spoil too much. But it's actually because it's like 10% of the game. They gave you an hour in the Resident Evil 2 demo, and in the Resident Evil 7 demo, and probably others, but I didn't play those. It feels like they tried to make the whole game smaller in an effort to avoid backtracking, but this is Resident Evil, guys. I played Code Veronica and liked it. I don't mind backtracking. It's kind of the point of the games. It's just baffling how much they cut out. Yeah, the original is a short game, but it's not shallow. From the live selection to just the gauntlet of running all the way across town to grab parts for the trolley, there's a lot the original has to offer that the remake would rather see as a cutscene. Nemesis is like the most underwhelming thing in the game. He's the icing on top of the cake. The shitty cake. With ass icing. He's all over the advertising for this game way more than Mr. X was for Resident Evil 2, and admittedly it might be to mirror the original release, how Nemesis was all over the branding for the original game as well, but it's weird that Mr. X is so much more present in Resident Evil 2 than Nemesis is in Resident Evil 3. He's so forgettable, it's kind of bizarre. It's almost like they wanted to combine Mr. X and Birkin from Resident Evil 2 and make that into the new villain. The experience of being chased through the city is entirely scripted, and maybe an hour to 2 hours in, Nemesis becomes fucking dog form, and at that point he's like entirely like Birkin, and Birkin wasn't scary. It's worth mentioning that in the Resident Evil series there's almost always some giant monster to fight, and I understand the developers may be feeling like this game was missing that, but I can do without big monsters. When Nemesis is just a big dude that wants to fucking you on the head, the game is terrifying. The fear is real, and for the most part, in your first playthrough, it feels like he could chase you anywhere. And this leads me back to the dodge mechanic. I feel like the developers were really concerned with making Nemesis too overpowered, and put in the dodge mechanic as a way to balance things out. The problem is, it's way too easy. I don't like being able to punch hunters in the face over and over again. That makes me feel a little like hunters aren't that much of a threat. In the original, dodging wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but it wasn't very hard. I'm perfectly fine with the way the dodge mechanic works against regular zombies, but when it comes to Nemesis, it just makes him feel like a pushover. That on top of the insane amount of ammo and healing items you get in this game, just make it too easy. And I've heard it gets better at the later difficulties, but I don't want to play through the game more times to experience the game for real. I feel like I got everything I needed out of it. Unless there's a mode that makes Nemesis unscripted, then I guess email me. This game in general feels really aimless. In fact, it feels like it didn't have a director. Oh wait, there was 5! I'm not here to talk on their credentials at all. I just don't think a game with this many people in the director's position would have a chance. There's no way every single person agreed with every change that needed to be made. And if they did, I guess they're all wrong. There's really nothing wrong with liking this game, but as a Resident Evil fan to my bones, I just wish there was more to it. And I just want a tyrant to chase me around in real life. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please subscribe or don't. Bye! Also, no, I didn't play Resident Evil Resistance. I don't have internet access.